Hey, Team Coach A here, and welcome to Unit 4, Day 5, The Pope and Conquest. After reading Caribbean leaders ask Old World for slavery and genocide reparations, learners will be able to summarize and determine the meaning of academic vocabulary through 4 text-based questions, scoring 66% after revision, RH 910.2.4. So here's our success criteria for the day. I can determine the central idea of text. I can determine the meaning of academic vocabulary. I can connect religious zealotry with dehumanization. Guided questions. Describe the brutality of the encomienda system and summarize the Pope and the Catholic Church in the New World. So, as always, we keep saying it, we keep talking about it. I say if there's anything you learn from me this whole year, it's got to be why did colonization happen? 3 reasons: God, glory, and gold. We talk about it every single class. That means it's probably important. So, Ferdinand and Isabella. So, at the time, there are 5 kingdoms on the Iberian Peninsula: Portugal, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Granada. And that happens to be where our story picks up. King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile, they look to become the ultimate power couple in Europe when they get married. Now, the Pope is obviously not going to let them go after Portugal, but he definitely will allow them to go after the Moorish or Islamic kingdom of Granada at the south of the Iberian. So, they get married. In 1492, they invade Granada. They take hold of the land, push the Moors off the Iberian, and they create España. And more importantly, they create a holy Catholic Iberian Peninsula. Now, that's where this guy comes in. So, you may be asking yourself, how does Christopher Columbus come into this? Well, simple. The Italian navigator, colonizer, and explorer is trying to, he really genuinely believes that if you just sailed far enough on the Atlantic, you're gonna hit India. The whole myth that people thought the world is flat is ridiculous. He was Italian. They knew the world was a sphere. So, he pitches it to England, pitches it to the kings or the city-states of Italy. Nobody's biting. But Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, well, they just got married. They just united España. They're looking to expand, probably trying to have some kids. And what better gift would there be for kids to have a transatlantic empire? So they say, we'll give you some money. And his ships, the Nina, the Pinto, and the Santa Maria, in 1492 sail the ocean blue. And a lot of stuff goes downhill from there. So his voyage begins the period of European expansion and invasion into the Americas. Now, why him? Why do we learn about him? Because we know that he's not the first European to reach the Americas. Because we're SpongeBob fans. I'll give you a second. Do you know who was the first European to actually step foot on American soil? Give you a hint. SpongeBob goes to celebrate with Patrick, but Patrick is out at the store getting more big paper. Give up? Leif Erikson! Happy Leif Erikson Day! Hinga dinga dorgan. Yeah, I don't get to work SpongeBob references into my videos often, but I did, because if there's an opportunity, I'm going to do it. But, real question is, let's look, this isn't in your textbook, let's look past this. Why? So if Leif Erikson was the first European on American soil, why do we keep talking about Christopher Columbus? he never stepped foot on North American soil. The closest he ever got was he saw Cuba and said, I bet you that's China. Well, it's right here. It's because he's Italian. So, at the turn of the century, lots of Italians were moving to the United States, and they had a conspicuously different language, and most importantly, they were Catholic. And at the time, America, well, to this day, America was a Protestant nation. They didn't care for these new Catholics, and the incoming Italians who were facing severe discrimination, lynchings, and various other acts of violence, they decided the only way that they were going to ever be truly part of America was they were going to have to fabricate their part in it. And that, my friends, is why Christopher Columbus and Columbus Day still exist. If you ever notice, whenever those arguments happen in those newspapers, just about every spokesman you're going to see is probably from a organization like Unico or the Knights of Columbus, which are Italian-American organizations. Because since they couldn't find an angle to be American, they made it up. So, beginning of the end. Yeah. So, Columbus initiates contact with the Europeans and indigenous Americans. And if you ever think maybe he just, he didn't know what was going on, he wrote in his journal, which, hey, they're very passive. They seem really agreeable. They're going to be pretty easy to conquer and enslave. Yeah. So, this brings a whole flood of Europeans into, quote, the New World. Now, we know the New World is not exactly the most progressive term. It refers to the land in the Western Hemisphere, including the North America, Caribbean, and South America, land unknown to the Europeans. But you don't call it a sterile adhesive strip, you call it a Band-Aid. So we're going to continue using the word New World, but I guess thoughtfully. He called them Indians because he thought he really was in India, and this is going to set up the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange, now known as the Triangle Trade, is the exchange of food, animals, people, and diseases between the New and Old World. More on that in a minute. Just so you know, this is what he thought the world looked like. He thought he had just shot over, kind of got over, and that was going to be China. Just kind of interesting. So, we talked about conquest, and they were referred to as conquistadors, or conquerors. They increased Spanish landholdings by conquering the American empires like the Aztecs and Incas, the most famous of which is Hernan Cortez. He lived between 1485 and 1547. He is credited with overthrowing the Aztec Empire and claiming Mexico for Spain. There's a lot of myths about him, about they thought he was God, so forth and so on. But what we do know historical records was he went to Tenochtitlan. He met with Moctezuma, the leader of the Aztecs, and he kidnapped him. And made a bunch of bogus trades and essentially brought down the entire empire. So, the empire looked like this. Now, you may question, all right, if they're this big conquering force, why didn't they have more of Africa like everybody else? Good question. It's because the Pope said they couldn't. So, the Treaty of Tordesillas is signed in 1494, so 2 years after Columbus lands in Hispaniola. The Pope decides to divide the New World between the Spanish and the Portuguese along the meridian 46-degree west. So the land to the east will belong to Portugal, and the land to the west will belong to Spain. Why? Well, Pope Alexander VI was nervous that two Catholic nations bordering each other would allow their colonial ambitions to go into an all-out war and tear the Iberian apart. So they signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, and the other countries in Europe were not party to this, like England and France. They did not really respect the Spanish and Portuguese claims. They also made their own Caribbean claims. But at the end of the day, this is like a proto conference. What conference? We talked about it 2 classes ago. Berlin Conference. That's right. Where the 14 European nations are like, well, we don't want colonial ambitions to cause us to fight each other here in Europe. Same basic concept. To avoid war in Europe, somebody far away decided what would happen to land very much inhabited. As you can see, here is the line of demarcation. And like I said about those devastating impacts. So they're sending corn and potatoes from the old world. They're like, hey, Europe, you're going to try these corn and potatoes. It's literally the greatest thing that's ever happened ever, because potatoes are the most delicious food in every form. And Europe sends over horses. That was a big introduction. They didn't have horses. And also introduced smallpox, measles, influenza, malaria. Because, as you guys probably should know, just because you're immune to something, doesn't mean you're not a carrier for it. Pardon. You could have the bubonic plague right now. You just wouldn't know it because you're immune to it. We have figured out how to kill the bubonic plague. But if you met somebody from an uncontacted tribe or aliens, they don't have immunity to it. So more than likely, if you met an alien, they would die from the bubonic plague. And we'd be like, whoa, why'd they die? The bubonic plague. When you shook their hand, you killed this alien. And that's exactly what happened here. More than 30% of the population of Mexico decreased in 10 years, and it declined for centuries. The Inca Empire in, trying to do math, 108 years went from 13 million to 2 million. And most tragically, the North Native American population, which was estimated to be about 2 million in 1492, was 500,000 indigenous people or First Nations people at the start of the 20th century. Disease wasn't the only factor. Of course, there is relocation, slaughter, massacre, all of that. But disease played a very big role. And Spain in the New World set up a rather strict system based on heraldry. We call it a caste system. So a caste system is any ranked hereditary system that together constitutes traditional society. So how their society was structured was not based on how good you were, a la Shaka Zulu or Genghis Khan. No, this was based exclusively who your parents were. So at the tippy top is the Peninsulas, people living in the New World born in Spain. The second you weren't born on old soil, you were dropped down a social strata, which meant you were now a Creole, people of Peninsulas but born in the New World. Below them is the Mestizos, children of Europeans but with one native parent. This is going to make up your higher low class, maybe your merchant class. And below them are what will be referred to as the encomienda labor system. Encomienda. So encomienda system is where the natives would work for the Spanish. But with all of the disease and other situations, the natives died out very quickly, and they were going to have to start bringing in enslaved people from Africa and from the Caribbean. And at the very bottom of the pecking order, of course, would be the natives and the enslaved. Very similar to the natives would be the mulattoes, which would be children of Europeans and African slaves. And that's it. So, after reading Caribbean Leaders Ask Old World for Slavery and Genocide Reparations, learners will be able to summarize and determine the meaning of academic vocabulary through 5 text-based questions, scoring 66% after revision, RH 910.2.4. So, here's what I got you to do. You gotta read the questions first. Don't read the article, then read the questions. Read the questions, then the article. Because then you know what you're looking for. So as you read the article, you know what you're looking for, your antennas are up, and when you see what you're looking for, you're going to highlight that in yellow. Yellow. That is what is going to help you answer the questions. When you see a word that we talked about in class, encomienda, cast, conquistador, anything like that, you're going to highlight that in green. Blue is where we're going to see bias or author's point of view. So anytime you see a subjective word like best, greatest, heartless, gutless, savage, anything of that nature, you're going to highlight that word in blue. And of course, always, it's worth 2 points. Ask me a question. So this is the new system. We've been working on this the entire unit. You are going to get 3 points for a correct quiz question. You're going to get 2 points for a correct annotation for 20 points total. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. As always, be smart, be safe. See you next time.